Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop us up, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out. Neha, welcome to the World XP podcast. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. It's a long weekend that we've got upon us, so can't complain there. All good things for sure. Um,
Exciting.
So, for those listening, why don't you do a quick introduction, introduce yourself, who you are and what you do, and then we'll jump into the question from the previous guest, and then we'll jump right into it.
Awesome. All right. So, for anyone who's listening, I'm Neha. I'm the founder and CEO of Tales of Spoon and Spice. But before that, I did research. I was in tech. I was a teacher for a while. I've done a little bit of a lot of things, and I always knew I'd probably end up in entrepreneurial. And here I am, starting my food company.
Fair enough. So, the question from the last guest is, how would you most like to be remembered?
Ooh, I've actually thought about this question a lot. Someone who puts an effort. That I've always said, and I think people who put effort with the best of intentions, those are my favorite type of people. So I think someone who put an effort and hopefully made a difference in someone's life, but putting in an effort is something that I always want to do. I put in efforts on people's birthdays, my company, my son, my marriage, like putting in an effort. So
Why? What made you? You said you'd been thinking about that. What made you? What was the like catalyst for saying, "Hey, I should start. I want to start thinking about this. Like, maybe tomorrow I'll get hit by a truck." And it's like, oh,
oh God.
this is
I think when you switch from being like, a single person to being in a relationship to then becoming a parent, right? You sort of, especially a mom, you sort of have this whole different like experience. I had a wonderful pregnancy and I had a very traumatic birth, and I think that's what sort of did it. Um, and so it's not to scare anyone who's listening, but the birth, I mean, I'm great afterwards, but like that moment was just like it was very defining for me. And then seeing my son for the first time, and now he's 2.5 years old, it's like I want him to know that his mother tried her best all day, every day, right? Maybe not 100% every day, but like most of the time I'm doing my best. And so I think becoming a mom really made me like sort of solidify who I am and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. That makes sense. I think a lot of people don't even they're so busy or there's so much going on that it doesn't even cross their mind until some sort of event like that happens, whether it's a birth or you get in like a car accident or something. Um, and it is weird. I think
Yeah.
speaking for myself, right? Just like going through life, right? If you're doing a side job and your normal job and this and that, and you're just always something, and there's always the next thing. It's like, oh, did I put the laundry in? Oh no, they've been sitting in the washer for 6 hours. Now it's moldy. Do I have to wash it again? Oh, what about the dishwasher? What are we doing for dinner? And then like to take a second and like, okay, what am I
Like,
leaving for everyone else like around me? It's definitely yeah,
exactly.
yeah, 100%. Um, okay, so obviously you founded your company, but I want to backtrack a little bit. So, did you mentioned that you always thought you would end up in entrepreneurship somewhere. Did that start from childhood? Like I want to know a little bit. I've been asking this question recently. The intros have been kind of the same recently, but how was the environment growing up in terms of, because when I grew up, it was, oh, you go to school, you go to college, you get a job. And that's, I think, what a lot of people around our sort of millennial sort of age are, or whatever. What's the next one? Z, I guess. Z? No,
And so, yeah.
X. I don't even know. Whatever, like that age range in like mid 20s into 40s. Like, oh, you go to school, go to college, get a job. Um, and the more people I talked about the entrepreneurs on that side of things, the you need some level of support because it's a big risk, right? It's very easy to just
Oh yeah.
go through that path and get the job, and then yeah, maybe you got some student loans, and that's a whole different discussion for a different day. But what was it like at home? Were your parents entrepreneurs, or like did you have a level of support, or when this sort of because it manifests itself at a young age for most people who want to do that, I feel like. And so sometimes you get the parents being like, "Oh, no, don't do that. Go be a lawyer, doctor, whatever." And then sometimes they're like, "No, go do you, man." And So what was that like for you? What was the family structure like? Did you have that kind of support to pursue what you wanted to pursue, or was there a kind of like this is the path that we wanted you to go down?
Um, I think early, very much early. So I'm a first generation immigrant. I think that's a very important. Also the eldest of three. Um, so both my parents came from India. I was born in India, came here when I was like five-ish. And it was very much like education was the main focus, especially in a South Asian household. That is what we do. You go to school, you get the grades, you do Kumon, and then you go to college, you succeed, and then you get a job, and that's what it is. So no, my parents were not entrepreneurs, but they were very hardworking. And I was always a rebellious child. I was in the sense of like my parents would say do A and I would do B, or I would never really do exactly what they wanted. I think I just was like, no, no, why do I have to do this? Like, I don't understand. Why can I only hang out with my friends once a month? Like, why is that, right? And I'm a big why asker. I will ask why until I'm blue in the face. And from and I can't speak for all South Asians, but I will speak for my family specifically. My dad was very much the typical South Asian. Now that I've grown up and enough therapy and stuff like that, just to know who I am as a person, now what your parents sort of mold you into. I've always been curious about how do you do it yourself. I've always been in awe of people who have built something from nothing. Right, my grandpa, so my mom's dad. We founded multiple universities and schools in India, like many of them. They're all very successful from like preschool all the way to college and onwards, right? And so entrepreneur does run in our family very much so. And I bother. And now the whole city knows him and the state knows him. And so how do you do that? I think that sort of triggered and snowballed into I can do it myself as well. Now that I'm older, and married and stuff, I was very nervous when I decided that I was going to do this. I Even though I'm married, I have my own money and everything. I went to my dad and I was like, so I'm gonna do a thing. And he was just like, what? And then he's very risk averse because naturally so he left his country to come here. He was out here. And for him, that was the biggest risk to leave his country where he knows everybody there to come here. And that was it. That's the risk he wanted to take. And he's like, I'm done taking risks. Um, and when I told him, it was weird because I thought he was going to give me all this pushback. And he's like, no, do it. If you can't do it while I'm alive, what's the point? Right. And I've never seen that side of him. So maybe I didn't have that support growing up necessarily to be like, just go do what you want and explore everything, right? And be on the meticulous path that I was on versus now at 33, it's like, go do it. It's just
Mm,
money. And it's like, okay, it's not just money, it's my savings that is, bootstrapping this company. And he's like, it's okay, I got you. You want your child babysat? We'll babysit the kid. You go do this. I want you to do it. I think he's really excited because this company is very close to my heart. It is a South Asian owned brand. It's for toddlers and kids, and I'm a mom. So it's like it's very personal to me. I think it's very personal to my dad. So maybe that has a lot to do with it, but hopefully that answers your question. I started off very I want. So
yeah.
yeah.
No, it definitely does. I think you get I get that vibe sometimes as well. It's like the parents just want their kid to succeed and don't do stupid things because they understand what risks would lie in pursuing that path maybe. And then it's like, oh, okay, once you figured life out and you got married and you had a kid and you got your own money, they're like, okay, well, you figured life out a little bit. It's fine. We trust like go do what you want.
We trust you to take the right decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's super interesting. I that makes sense as well. Okay, so you go to college and what was your degree in?
In biological sciences. So I studied biology and chemistry.
Right. So okay. So was there um why that?
Well, I actually was an accounting and finance major early on because even though I was smart, I think I dealt with a lot of typical South Asian first generation immigrant childhood stuff, where it's like, I want to go have fun. Why am I not allowed to do that? Not allowed to do it. So I think I wasn't as academically focused early in my life as I should have been, even though I had the potential to do great things. So like, you know what? I'll just do accounting finance. It's easier. And then I hope no one's listening to this going, oh my gosh, you think accounting and finance is easy? But like for me, it was like, all right, it's subtracting, calculus maybe here and there. Let's do it. And I was told, I remember freshman year of high school, what I wanted to do was science when I first started high school, I remember. And I got a D the first semester of honors chemistry in high school. And the teacher specifically looked at me and said, "Oh, you should never become a hard science major. Like, that's not for you. And you are not going to be a science student." And I think I carried that somewhere subconsciously that I could just never do science. Science is too hard for me. And I don't know, one thing led to another. And God, I hated accounting. I hated finance. Um, and I switched. I told my dad, I was like, I'm gonna do science. And he's like, "Oh no." Because he like so, and the thing is, I didn't get bad grades in high school. Like I did decent, I would say. And he's like, "All right, but you're gonna go to community school because I'm not paying for a university. You're gonna go to community school locally here in Illinois, and we're gonna see how you do in like basic, bio and chem classes." And I got straight A's. And it sort of like proved the fact that sometimes what people say really does hold on to you when you're a kid. And I had to like sort of
Mm,
break apart from that and say, okay, I can do this. I have to study a little bit harder. I have to go to tutoring, whatever. And that turned into me going to Loyola University here in Chicago and doing those classes and being so excited about science, which then led me to tutoring all of the kids. I've tutored hundreds of kids while I was in college, in hard sciences, from middle school to high school to even in college. While I was taking the class, I was also tutoring the next person next to me, like, "Hey, this is how you do it." And I don't know, it was a lot. I think science is just, I love the way things work. I think it's just so fascinating. It's not always black and white, there's so many exceptions. And I just love knowing how things work. And I don't know, you kind of sound smart when you're like, "I'm a hard science major," but and my husband fell. He was also, he made it interesting, and my professors made it interesting, and I just fell in love overall.
yeah. Is that's so I don't as a teacher, like you tell somebody, "Oh, don't do this." And it's like, yeah, I get it, but also like maybe you're right. But also the amount of times that I've heard stories of people struggling in middle school or high school with a subject and then going on to very much excel at that thing later or something adjacent to that thing. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but something
Sure.
related is like I don't need. So I recorded the last one I recorded with was a guy. He's starting the school called Apogee, where he's starting one of the campuses, and they're trying to like completely revamp how school is. And instead of grades, they're grouping them into like age groups because he's like, when in life are you ever with people only the same age as you? He's like, never. So they have like 4 to 7 or 8, I think he said, and then like the 7 or 8 year olds when they understand
Very
something, they
Montessori
can,
style. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, very much like that. And it's just like I don't know, like my parents, I'm the oldest of five. My parents you moved the youngest out of public school this last year or the year before. And it's just I don't know. You start to hear stories about it, and like I know teachers as well who are trying very hard, and then also teachers who are leaving. Like I know somebody who went to school for teaching, was teaching for less than a year, got stuck with, well, I say got stuck with, his class was very big, and then somebody else left, so he had more kids, and it was just, he couldn't handle it. And he's like, why am I doing this? It's like, I feel like I'm
No,
not
I
doing anything to
understand.
the kids. And yeah, so I don't know. We're in a weird spot education wise, I think, as a country, and that stories like yours just kind of are another anecdote that to add to the pile of that. And then also to your point of tutoring, it's like if you know it well enough to teach somebody else, like you really understand the subject. You can't teach somebody else if you don't really understand. Like you can understand it well enough to pass the test, but to actually teach somebody else, you actually have to know what it is. Which I find
I
also
agree.
okay. Yeah. So okay, so that's super interesting. But of all the things that you said that you could have picked after leaving accounting and finance, that's the one you picked? Like, what was the
I
draw, I
did.
guess?
Honestly, I actually don't know. Usually people say, I did want to go to med school. I wanted to become a doctor. I think maybe that was it. I was like, "Oh, let's see if I can," in a very immigrant South Asian household. I felt like I had something to prove. Um,
Mm,
Not that anyone will never admit it in my household, but I think I always felt like I needed that validation of like, hey, I can do it. Like my brother's an engineer, my sister is the youngest, and she went into HR. Like she didn't even want to do science, and she's like, no, I want to do HR and do psychology, and that's she's amazing at it. It fits her personality, um, and I think I just wanted to prove myself, like, oh, I'm just as smart. Like, look at me, like, what a kid I heard my entire life of, oh, oh, well, but for my dad, he went to basically the Harvard of India. Like, he went to an excellent school. And when you hear that constantly over and over, it's like, oh, am I smart enough to do that? Can I do that? And so it's like, oh, well, I'm going to prove it now. I'm going to prove you wrong. I can do it, right? So then I did. I mean, I was like, how hard could this be? And I think that's actually something I learned. I don't remember who exactly told me. It was in passing. They said millions of people have passed these classes when I was struggling in college. And like, just say, how hard could this be? And I don't know, that really stuck with me. And I kind of believe that even with my journey right now as a founder, how hard could this be? And obviously, it's very hard. I have panic attacks every day, but like, I just always like, how hard could this be? And I feel like it just gets me through the next step. Like next day, what's next? What's next? So yeah, I
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think there was any one point in my life that I was like, I'm gonna become a hard science major.
Yeah. That how hard can be a very double-edged sword because if you're struggling and then you also have the how hard can it be and you're like how hard can I be
Yes,
and I still am not doing it is like that can be very that can get you for sure on a bad day. It's like it could make it very
I
much
agree.
worse. Yeah. Okay, so you graduate and then what's next for so at this point are you already saying like, oh, I want to start my own business or like
No.
where does that actually manifest? Well, okay, so if it doesn't, what's next after you so you graduate and then what's next?
So I was tutoring a lot. I actually started the company called The Bigger Picture. So that's where sort of the entrepreneurial side came for rent and stuff like that. And he was paying for other things. So I was like, oh, I'm not gonna go work at Chipotle for minimum wage just because like my class, and not because there's anything wrong with Chipotle and minimum wage, but I was in like research. I was in a lab for hours at a time. I was like, when will I have time to go do this? And I was like, I want to make more money in a shorter period of time. So that's when that tutoring idea came. And I was like, oh, I can charge 20, $30 an hour. Right. And that was a lot back then for me. And so I would work like, I don't even know, 15-hour weeks. And I would be making for a college kid, that's a pretty decent amount of money when your parents are paying for other stuff and you have to pay for the rent and you're sharing a place, right? So that turned into people really liking what I did and helping high school kids with their ACT and SAT prep. And what I did was I remember buying all these SAT and ACT books and I just went through all of them and I started like on my own with no teaching background. I was like, what are the standards that are being taught? And I like Googled and I tried to figure out there's no way that these are all just unique questions every year. There has to be standards that they're testing. And I figured it out for a decent amount. And I made my own ACT prep and SAT prep class. And then I started, marketing it to people. And people are like, well, we're not going to pay you $50 an hour. We can pay this person with a PhD. I was like, okay, great. And this one client, he was actually one of my first clients. He said, listen, Neha, I believe you. My kid really likes you. And his daughter was, I believe, a sophomore, beginning sophomore year of high school, and said, but I'm only going to pay you $15 an hour because I could go to a PhD student who or a doctorate and pay them 50. Like, why would I pay? You don't even have a degree yet, right? And I was like, fine, 15 that my daughter gets up in the ACT. So if she's at a 20, she gets to a 25. That's 5 points. For every point, I'll pay you $500 that she increases. And I was like, oh, yes, I'll take it. $15 minimum per hour because he wanted to pay me for my time. But then after that, she increased 8 points. And I was like beyond shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? And he wrote me a check and he was so happy. Like these parents, like Hinsdale, Oakbrook parents, like my name just flew like everywhere. Everyone wanted to work with me. And that all of a sudden turned into me being overbooked, which wasn't good because then my grades started slipping. But then when you're young and not that smart, you see this like sort of thirst for money. You're like, oh my gosh, I have so much money now. And, I'm 21, 22 years old. In 6 months, making like $30,000, $40,000 is a lot of money,
Yeah.
and I clearly didn't save for taxes. So that's like a whole other story. My dad
Yes.
to pay my taxes because I anyway and it turned into something and I sort of lowered it and then I hired people. I basically said, hey, like you work for me, I'll find you the client. But like you're gonna charge $45 an hour for whatever the subject is, and I'm gonna take 15 from it. And they're like, that's fine, that's better than minimum wage. And so I was making money even when I wasn't working. And that's sort of how I snowballed it. But it was just a lot of driving back and forth because parents wanted in person, because this is way before COVID. And it was a lot. I was in Chicago, then I was in the sun. I graduated and I said, what's the next step for me? Then I realized I really loved teaching. Like I love educating people, especially in the sciences, anything to do with science. And so I said, well, I don't want to go into a teaching license yet because that's more schooling. I'm not sure if I want to be a teacher yet. And so I was like, okay, let's go to a charter school in Chicago because you don't need a teaching license. You just need a bachelor's degree and a master's or one or the other, right? And so I went in, I started at my first school and like 2.5 years into it, and I was the saddest I've ever been because I love teaching, but the administration, and not for that specific school, just in general, how school is handling education, especially education in science, I don't agree with, and I don't think any professor in their right mind would agree with. And I was like, I'm not going to be a part of this problem. And I told my students goodbye in 2019, December 2019. I told my advisory, everybody. I was teaching chemistry at the time. And I was like, and they know that. I mean, I have so many of my students that follow me on TikTok and like other social. And I left, and then I went into tech. And you've interviewed my husband, and he's in tech, and he was like, if you want to go into tech, you need to learn SQL and Python and Tableau and all this. And I was like, okay, sure. And so he goes, here you go learn. So then I went a semester to school. Right before I had quit teaching, that's I did it, and I got an interview with a consulting firm in Chicago, and I got the job, and I started working, and I did a lot of pharmaceutical compliance and coded here and there a little bit, mostly senior like project management work, product management work, and sort of to answer what you were asking before, what was that point that led me to it was to entrepreneurship was like
And we're
so
back.
yeah, sorry, technical difficulties as always. So yeah, I went into tech. I worked for two different consulting firms, had a great time, but at that time I also had a child. I got married, I had a child, and when I had my son, I realized I still wanted to be a working parent, but I wanted to be around as much as possible. And I knew that wasn't possible with consulting always. And at the same time, I wanted to do something for myself. And I started thinking of all these random ideas, like what could I do? But I also wanted to build a business that was toddler related. And then it hit me. I was feeding my son, and this will never die in my memories. Like it is such a core memory now for me. I was feeding my son, and he like I was feeding him Indian food, and he goes, "Ugh," like because he's like 14 months at the time, I believe, and he goes, "Ugh," and that triggered a memory so far back, and I don't know why it triggered it, but it was when I was in middle school that I brought Indian food to school, and I grew up in Naperville, and so at that time there wasn't that huge of a South Asian population when I was growing up, so I brought Indian food to school, one of my favorites. And I was so excited because I was new to, by the way, I was also a new student, which is always never good when you come in the middle of the year as a new student, never fun. Everybody at that table, ew, what's that? And it was just like they were making fun. And like, as a grown woman, adult now, I understand like kids weren't exposed to it. Now Indian food or South Asian food is a huge trend, but back then it was like very hurtful. And even when they're like, oh, throw it away, I can't sit with you. So I would just throw my lunch away. For like over a year, my poor mother would cook food and I would throw it away. Like, because I didn't want to get made fun of. Who does? What kid wants to at sixth, seventh grade, right? And I would eat whatever like cookie and banana or whatever else she like kept. I would just eat that and I would starve. And then I would come home and like scarf dinner because I didn't eat anything the whole day. But like that memory got triggered, and then I realized like I started just quickly like Google searching like nonstop for days, and I couldn't find a single diverse like food company for toddlers. Like I just couldn't. Everything was pureed green beans or pureed apples and bananas and peas. And I was like, no wonder there's a picky eating situation happening. If you like disregard like obviously like kids who have actual like needs where there's a texture problem and they have like a sensory issue. Besides that, like that's on the outlier side. But if you're not introducing kids to spices, and not spicy, not like with the heat, but spices, how are they ever going to learn to try to eat other foods if they're always eating basic food constantly? And sort of that's where the idea came. And my husband's like, oh, okay, so you really want to switch lanes and go from tech to like CPG space. And I was like, correct. I would like to go to the food space. And I just, at that time, I was so nervous. I was like, no, but like we're both making good money and I want to go travel. And it was like, back and forth, like, do I really want to do this? Am I having a like a midlife crisis? What is it? And then I was working on a client and I was like making my son food or something. And then the first layoffs went down. Like everybody knew the layoffs were happening. And, all that tech stuff that's happening where there was like no money in tech. Everyone's getting laid off. And I was kind of nervous because I just came off of a client after 18 months. And I was like, what if I'm in this round? And long and behold, I was. But at the same time, I was like, okay, if God wants me to start this company, there will be a sign. Well, what else is a sign besides getting laid off? But the funny part was that I was planning on quitting anyway. And then they laid me off. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is a sign. I'll take my severance. And the company I was working with was wonderful. Like I have nothing bad to say about them. They were very kind for someone who worked less than 2 years, as far as like my packages and stuff that I got. But I took that as a sign. I took all that money and the money that I had saved in my own like personal savings. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna turn this into a food company. And that's sort of where it started. And once I realized that, I realized, oh, I have no friends in the food space. Everyone's in tech. Like nobody's in the food space. And now that I got laid off in what was it, September, and now we're here in May. And my God, the sheer amount of learning that I've had to do is like I haven't learned this much even in college. I've learned more in less than a year than I did in 4 years of college. Just you just have to hustle. You just have to go and ask everything to everyone. And there's literally no such thing as stupid questions. I mean, I've literally asked people like, hey, how does one get into the food space? What does CPG even stand for? Like I knew, but like I'm simplifying it, but what is CPG? What are the requirements to get into Whole Foods or Target,
What
right?
is
And
CPG?
yeah, I'm sorry.
What is CPG? I don't know.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, consumer packaged goods. So anything
Okay.
like bars and like pouches for kids, anything that you find at the retail, uh, in the stores or whatever. And then I decided, okay, is there an incubator? Is there an accelerator? And I was talking to people. My husband actually has friends who started a company, um, and they were like, hey, we only know tech, but like maybe there's like a food incubator you can get into or an accelerator. And then I just literally on Google, Chicago incubator for food. That is what I typed in, and I just started searching, and long and behold, I found the hatchery, and the hatchery took me. It's in Chicago, it's on the west side. And I've been learning a lot from like how to make a business plan and a P&L report and a financial plan and everything. Like, what is branding? What is my brand identity? Right? It's easy to say that I want to create toddler and kid food, but that's just an idea. Like, there's so many like very minute steps that you have to do. And right now I'm in the very critical stage of figuring out how to shelf stabilize my food if I'm gonna do that, because the thing is in order to shelf stabilize, you have to have a lot of capital. And I don't have that capital on me right now. So I might have to raise money. So I'm in that stage right now. So it's fun. It's exciting.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot. Well, obviously, but
Yeah.
what is the client search looking like? Like how does that work? Like I can imagine you finding clients for tutoring or coaching or mowing lawns or any of those other type things or service-based industries, but this is a product-based industry. So how are you going about looking for clients?
Are you saying clients in sense of like consumers, like people who would buy my food?
Anyone who will pay you for the food. So whether that's a retailer that you put it
I
into
see.
somewhere or
Yeah.
somebody or a consumer who would then
Consumer.
actually
Yeah.
consume it. Yeah, either or.
Uh, yeah. I'm shameless. I'm gonna say that right now. I I have a lot of grit and a lot of perseverance when it comes to this. I will go to networking events and like, listen, I am new to this space. I have an excellent plant-based idea for toddlers and kids. It does not exist. There is a gap in this market, and I will pitch myself till I'm blue in the face. And a lot of people love the idea, and they're like, "Hey, okay, show me that there's a market for it, right? Show me that there's consumers who are willing to put that $1 down." So I actually launched on social media to create this brand identity, to create this community that people can trust on May 1st. I have, I think, like 120 followers since May 1st of this year. And it hasn't even been a month yet. And I'm posting content about early, childhood nutrition. And it's a food and education company. I don't know if I said that early on, but I didn't want to just be a nutritious like food company. I wanted to be food and education because I love education. And I think the one of the reasons um I think I'm different compared to all of the other brands out there is that I don't just tell you this is what you should be eating or this is what's healthy, try it for your child. I'm giving you the why behind it. I'm showing you the research behind it. Everyone talks about allergens and okay, make sure you introduce allergens. Yes, everybody, it's the same broken record. It's an important record, don't get me wrong. It's important, but you need to go more into that. And then I decided, okay, there has to be a holistic approach because what is healthy eating, right? When you're a child, you basically eat what your parents put on your plate, in a sense, right? As you get older, you kind of don't have much of a say unless your mom wants to make or dad wants to make 1,000 different meals a day or something like that for you. But
Never.
healthy eating, never, right? No, it's like what I make is what you get kind of thing. But it's a very intrinsic thing. Eating is actually a very personal journey, right? I struggled with my weight. I struggled with like emotional eating and stuff like that. And how do you do that, right? I think we all have that. We put on that freshman 15, 20, whatever, when we go to college. And I know that when I get stressed, I eat. And I stopped doing that a while back because I was like, this is not healthy. So what is it? And I realized it's food and education. And the reason it's education is kids need to know why they're eating what they're eating. And it's not just because it's healthy. So that I decided I was going to write my first children's book. So it's a series of 7. I finished the first one. It's all copyrighted, all the legal stuff is done. I'm very excited. I'm going to launch it June 1st. For pre-order, it's basically Age of the Spoon is a character. It's a little spoon. He wants to be a chef when he gets older, so he wants to travel the whole world and learn about different spices and culture and appreciate different cultures, right? And he stops. His first stop is in India. He's learning about different spices. So the first book teaches little kids about just different cultures and spices and why it's so important, right? And I noticed that like when I give him books like about like for example Chinese culture or Vietnamese culture or whatever, he reads about those books with that have food in it. And then he just wants to try it. He's like, oh, it's so interesting. I want to try it. I want to eat dumplings. I want to eat pot stickers because they're all in the books. The first real exposure to food most kids get, like to different foods, is through literary. Like it's through books, right? My son has a book called A Thousand Words. He knew what a croissant was before he ever ate a croissant. He knew what a donut was before he ever ate a donut. And that's where that idea came. Same with like potty training. I read books to him months before we ever tried potty training, and he was so familiar with it. It wasn't scary anymore. It wasn't anxiety inducing. And I think we forget that we even as adults we can't handle a lot of like stimulus, but for kids, everything is new. Every single day, every hour of every day for little ones, everything is a stimulus. They're basically little anxiety driven monsters. Just kidding. They're not monsters. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to be a children's book where they get to read about South Asian culture and a cultural appreciation, and they get to try the food that's actually in the book. So when kids read about it, they're like, oh, khichdi is lentils and rice. Guess what? They read about it and they get to try it. So it's a very immersive experience. And so that's why I think I'm a lot different than other food brands out there because everyone just talks about it. I'm like, okay, let's create books. And the rest 6 books that are coming, hopefully, fingers crossed, they're about other spices, other cultures to get kids that exposure. Because I got bullied because those kids lacked exposure. And it's not their fault. If your parents aren't exposing you to different things, you won't know any better. Right. And so my goal is that this book, this company gets to expose kids to a whole array of different foods and culture, and that so the future generation is less picky, not just as eaters, but how we make friends, how we talk with each other. We're more open-minded, I would say.
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts about all the things
Yeah.
that you just said. The first, because it's the most I don't know if interesting is the right word. Obviously,
Sure.
there's a lot of cultural, we'll say, conflict going on at the moment. Are you at all concerned or um yeah, I guess concerned is the right word, that with the book as far as um like using a word like diverse, like I don't care, but from like a marketing perspective, is that something that um are you cognizant of that? Have you thought about that? Is that something that you even care? Like you're like, it's fine, it's just food, it doesn't matter. Like, do these things kind of cross into the right? People talk about DEI and all this stuff, and people get all worked up about all it. But like, I whatever side of that they fall
Sure.
on, it's very like, um, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. Like it induces emotion, I guess. Um, is that something that is all, and then on a little bit on top of that, and I know we talked about this on the phone, but the same question goes with like the plant-based protein, right? You like people be like, ah, it's impossible burgers, it's just oils and those are horrible for you. And that's not, we talked about that on the phone. So I'm not saying
Yeah.
that you're doing that, but like as a marketing kind of
Yeah. Of
situation, do those things weigh into like if you're giving somebody a pitch
course.
networking thing, like do you try to be careful with your choice of words in that aspect? Or like how do you go about navigating that?
Oh man, if I have thought very thoroughly on what I say and how I say it. Um, I do know what you're talking about. That whole diversity quota when it comes to hiring and stuff like that. I do understand. There's unfortunately a negative connotation around it. I completely get it. But we're talking about food.
Yeah.
This is very different. I'm talking about kids trying different foods from different cultures. I mean, I don't think I know anyone who just eats like one type of food all day. Like Uber Eats is there for a reason. Like people are ordering food. Today they had Chinese, tomorrow they have Thai, the next day they have Italian. Like it's just an exposure thing, right? So yes, I say the word diverse or multicultural experience, if you want to call it. Um, yes,
But
I'm not going to shy away
you
from
know
it.
how people
Yeah, of
get though, right? Like you just it doesn't
course.
matter if it's food. You
Then
say
they're not
that
my
word and
market,
like
and
it's
that's the thing.
yeah, yeah.
That's a hard thing I've had to learn. I can't be a people pleaser. Either
Mm,
you like me for me or you don't, and I could care less. I've actually talked to investors, potential investors, who's like, "Well, I never grew up with Indian food, and my kids turned out fine." And I straight up asked them, I was like, "Sir, were you one feeding your children?" And they're
yeah.
like, "Oh no, that was my wife." Okay, that answers my question right there. And two, are your kids picky eaters as adults? They're like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, my daughter is." This is literally an investor on a call with me. I was like, "Okay, so do you see the problem here?" It's an exposure thing, right? And
Yeah.
if you don't want to expose your kids to, don't. No one's forcing your hand to expose your kid to different cultures, right? I'm saying there is a market. There are South Asians in this country and outside this country that would love to see themselves represented in the baby food aisle, right? And that is what I'm there for. So if people disagree with me, I'm like, I completely understand. We can have a conversation. I don't need to jump down someone's throat for it. You're just not my market. And we can go our separate ways. And I think the plant-based thing that you said, yes. So plant-based thing, when I say plant-based, I mean literally it came from the ground. It is the most minimally processed food out there. Lentils, legumes, fruits, and vegetables are what I'm doing. I am not doing things that the lab made. There's no synthetic oil, none of that. It's, you know what? If you like Impossible Burger, do it. Live your best life. But for kids, no, that is not what I'm doing. Everything that you will eventually see on the market for Tales of Spoon and Spice, you know what it is, you know where it's grown, and that's it. It is not lab made anywhere. I've actually learned a lot of the different jargons, if you want to call it, around like legal. Like, what does it mean if it's a natural flavor? What does it
Yeah.
mean if it's artificial? What does it mean if it's healthy? There's like a legal term. You can't just write the word healthy without getting in trouble. Like, but I have attorneys for that. And I just thought, wow, it's all a game at the end of the day. Like what they're marketing. I don't want to play this game. I just want kids to eat healthy food that's literally grown in the ground, pulled up, cleaned up, cooked, and fed. Like the least amount of processing is what I'm here for.
Amazing.
I that is what I want. I'm so tired of it. I think we need to go back to our literal roots and start eating minimally processed foods. And I've actually got a question that you recently about, do you not believe in animal like protein? And I was like, I never said that. I literally never said that. It's like just because you own a plant-based company, of course, I do believe in plant-based eating. I think There's a like the Mediterranean diet. There's so many diets out there. As a founder and a mom, I am not going to stick to one type of dieting. First of all, dieting, that's like a whole nother topic I don't want to touch because it's very sensitive to a lot of people, and I'm well aware of that. For toddlers and kids, the word diet should never be around unless it's something that you as a family believe, like you want to be a vegetarian, you want to be a vegan, that's on you. But as a founder and an owner of a company, my job is to do what's right by little kids, not by investors, by little kids. And that is my like North Star. If I will feed it to my son, other people can eat it. And that's how I would never feed junk to my son. Therefore, I don't want to create junk. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
couldn't agree more. That's awesome. That's a great answer. Um, I love especially the getting rid of processed foods. I think we see, not to go down this rabbit hole or
Sure.
spend much time on it, but we see a lot of like chronic diseases and inflammations and all these things that have skyrocketed in the last 10, 20 years or whatever. And it's you hear stories about people going on to like paleo diets or things of right, not to use the word diet, but basically just they
Sure.
eat meat and
Yeah. A certain style. Yeah.
vegetables, eat meat and vegetables and like rice or whatever the case may be, but
Great. Yep.
anything no processing, right? It's like the ingredient from the store is the ingredient, and like the ingredient label, there's no things they can't pronounce on it. And I think we talked about this on
Yeah.
previously as well.
Correct.
And you hear stories about people's like knee pain going away or whatever because all of a
Correct.
sudden the inflammation goes away because they're not putting all these chemicals into their bodies. So I think what you're doing is amazing, honestly. It's more people I think need to be aware of these things, and so to kind of use all that to follow up to the next question, which is like what are I, I didn't know that there were all these legal terms for healthy or whatever the like that you mentioned earlier. What are some of those things that you've learned, or like what should people be looking for on labels and marketing and things like what are kind of the tricks of the trade that you've learned and people should be on the lookout for?
I think when people say like, oh, no added sugar, right? People love it's like, you know what they market? Like usually if you look at a packaging, they'll say things like protein, fiber, and no added sugar or no artificial flavors, right? But then there's like fillers. There's fillers there to keep that thing shelf stable usually or keep the texture that you want it to stay, right? There's things out there that are actually not um soluble by the body. Like it doesn't digest well with the body. It causes very high inflammation. And here's the thing, I don't like talking about it, like especially on this podcast. One, because I would say that I don't want to misspeak. I always am a first person, even as like a former teacher. If you don't know well enough, you should stop talking.
Fair
So
enough.
I'll stop there. But I will say that just because it says the word natural doesn't mean anything. Just because it's organic doesn't mean it's better for you. And I will say that. Like when people say, like for example, like skincare, for example, just because it's an $800 face cream doesn't mean it's amazing. And just because it's $5 doesn't mean it's trash. It's the same thing. There's like a spectrum of it, how things are made. For example, when people say no preservatives, right? I can give you this best example for especially for people who have kids. No preservatives are great, right? But a lot of food pouches, like the thing that you see kids sucking on, that like pureed bananas, fruits, mangoes, whatever, people put citric acid into it. They have to lower the pH so that bacteria doesn't grow, right? And they have to lower it, make it more acidic so bacteria doesn't grow. Well, how do you do that? Well, you add lemon juice or citric acid. Citric acid is bad for your teeth if parents aren't brushing their kids' teeth well enough. It's just sitting on kids' gums, kids' teeth, and it hurts their stomach. It's an irritant to the stomach, right? But then you look at it like, oh, it's just lemon juice. It's only citric acid. It's not a big deal. But it is, if there are kids, I mean, when I was doing my market research last year, I came across parents on Facebook who were openly admitting, and I understand why. My kid doesn't eat, they're a picky eater. My kid eats 4 to 5 food pouches a day. And I was like, oh, it's like, yeah, and they have like the worst gas pains. Their bowel movements are non-existent, whatever. Well, why do you think that's happening? Right? Why, like your food should not be older than your child. And that is my sort of philosophy right now. Like I think I'm actually very much sort of heading toward like fresh or frozen. Even though I know the market wants shelf stable because parents just don't know when their kids are going to get to eating whatever food they buy. They don't want to be wasteful. But I don't know. There's a whole market for, especially for South Asians, where they're like, I want fresh food delivered to my house for my toddler. And then there's the other side of it where it's like, I want it shelf stable for 2 years, 3 years. I want to be able to just keep it in my bag and take it wherever I go for the convenience. So I'm right now, one of the struggles I'm having is finding that beautiful balance between convenience and healthy.
Yeah.
So
Also,
yeah,
from a business perspective, if you're doing only fresh or frozen and you don't sell it, then you're wasting
it's
money and
and then I don't want to be
resources as
wasteful,
well.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What an insane thing to say. Your food should not be older than your kid. What a bonkers thing to say. And as soon as you said it, I was like, I can, that's definitely true. 100%. Um, oh, okay. This I it's just okay. Um, just yeah, can't wait to have a kid and read all the ingredients labels again, like I'm doing from myself, and I just don't even
Yeah.
know it. I find myself Googling at the grocery store, probably like every time, even though I buy the same things, I'd like find a new term that I didn't on a thing that I've already been buying, and I'm like, damn, I didn't see that one last time. Let me Google this. Um,
That's actually something that I plan on doing because I'm not going to add fillers. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to do it. That every ingredient, there will be a QR code. There's a tech portion to this that you can click it and it'll literally tell you this is this, this is this. And if it's something that you don't know what it is, it'll tell you why it was put in and the potential hazard it may have to your child. It might not be anything, but I want to be as transparent as physically possible because no one's going to come after me one day and say, you misrepresented something. I mean, how many times do we hear about big food companies? And I know for a fact, I'm going to get shit on for saying this, but how many times have we had big food companies out here say it's healthy and then 10 years later, there's lawsuits happening? There's
always.
cancer being found. Always, always. So why don't we just stop that? How about that? Well, let's just stop it, create a thing that allows parents of all socioeconomic backgrounds to be able to afford healthy food. Like, why don't we just stop that? And I think I've actually thought about this a lot, is I think there should be less greed. And this is a whole, we can talk about that on a different topic. Because if you have to make profits, don't get me wrong, I'm all about making profits. I'm all about the business aspect of it. Because if I can't make profits, then there is no business. Let's just call it, there has to be a bottom line. But I think, do I want to make profits? I actually, my husband's ex CEO said, what type of company do you want to be? What kind of CEO do you want to be? You really need to think about that a lot. Do you want to be the one that makes the 100 million, like, or the 100, $200 million companies? Or do you want to be the $5, $10 million company? And I was like, wow. I mean, like when you think about it from an investor, you want to say, if you're talking to investors, you want to be like, I want to be $1 billion company. Well, guess what happens when you become $1 billion company?
You got people you got to answer to.
Exactly. And so if you want something to stay healthy and good, you have to keep it small. And even if that means my revenue is 14, 15, 20 million one day, fingers crossed, 30 million, I think that I want to be able to look parents in the face and go, you know what, I did everything. I didn't do everything right, but I tried more than my best to make sure that it was, the kids of all backgrounds could get it. Because like I said, back to like teaching, right? I really want to share this with people. When I was a teacher here in Chicago, I worked for a very under-resourced community. And there were kids who would come to me and go, Miss Singh, uh, do you have any granola bars that I could take to my siblings? And I was like, sure. Like they knew I always carried snacks in my drawers. And I later found out through other teachers and staff that the food that they ate at the school was the only food they were going to eat. And so when COVID happened, right, I left right before COVID, a lot of kids weren't getting food because like their parents just weren't able to afford feeding them multiple times a day. And I don't know, I think that's also what triggered this me starting this food company is that there are kids out there. There's no reason for kids not to have food, healthy food at the tip of their fingers, right? But we have junk food at the tip of our fingers. It's cheaper to go buy Cheetos than to go and buy a salad. And I think that's asinine.
Yeah.
That is asinine, right? And I thought about this. I said, if I keep my profit margins large, right, which means my product is very expensive. If it's very expensive, only a certain socioeconomic class can afford it. And I've actually thought about this a lot. So I'm like, okay, how do I fix this problem? And that's sort of the thing that I'm sitting in right now from a business planning perspective, a financial perspective of what do I do? Do I make the packaging look so beautiful like all the other shit that you see out there? It's just beautiful packaging that's going to get thrown in the trash anyway. and that's what, eats into the cost? Or do I do something that's bare minimum? You know it's good for you. You're gonna open up the packaging anyway, put it in a bowl, and then you can feed your child, and the cost comes down to the consumers. So like this is the part I'm in currently, trying to find the best way to be able to run a business in a healthy manner, but also know that a lot of people are able to afford this food, not just the upper middle class and upper class, because that's actually what's happening right now. Is the healthiest baby food on the market right now is $5 a food pound. And if your kid is eating 3, 4 a day, what is
Yep,
that? That's
that's a
very
lot.
expensive. So sorry, I went on a tangent there, but
No, it's all good, all good.
yeah,
That, I mean, that's why we're here, right? We need to hear people's thoughts on the markets that they're in and the industries that they're in and the things that they're doing to try and mitigate some of those things or change some of those things. Um, so back on, you actually went to the education piece, which is where I was gonna kind of go and maybe depending on how long we talk, wrap things up
sure,
at this part. But obviously you tutored people, you were a teacher. It's kind of, I would say, in your DNA at this at a certain point to like educate, whether it's the industry that you're in or even like when you're consulting for a tech company at
sure.
borderline, you're
Yep,
teaching or giving advice and recommendations and things
yep.
of that nature. You're absorbing information and sharing it with other people. Um, so when you're learning all this stuff, obviously you're writing the book about it, but where is the education piece? Is there going to be classes online or like a video series or like what's like how is it all going to fit together with so like if somebody wants to buy the food
Yeah,
or they're not sure about the food, where are they going to go? They get the kids book, like what's how is it all going to mix together?
sure. So there's a few things there. The first one is of course a children's book, because I want parents reading to their every parent should be reading to their kids, right? At least once a day. It's good for their future success. So there's the book that sort of introduces the food, not just to the kids, but to the parents. There's a lot of parents who don't know how to use a lot of the South Asian spices, which is understandable, of course. And the reason I wrote the book is like when I was thinking about starting this company, I was like, how do I educate the parents? And then I realized no parent really wants to hear somebody else's advice. We get so much unsolicited advice from everybody. So I said, you know what? I'm not doing that. I'm not going to go up to a parent like, hey, you should do this for your kid. No, we're not doing that. So instead, I'm like, okay, how do I do this? And so that's where that book idea came. I said, the parents will read the book to the kids and, secondhand learn it themselves, hopefully. And it's like it's a twofer, right? And then the other education portion is I just started today. That was the first episode. It's called Choti Bites, which is small bites. Choti is a Hindi word for small. And so basically we take really big, complex topics. Like this is very much my teaching side. And we break it down into under 5 minutes. There's no reason to be this like you don't have to go down this rabbit hole. You could go down the rabbit hole for the rest of your life on one topic if you really wanted to, right? So like today we talked about something called neophobia, which is the fear of trying new foods for toddlers. It's developmentally very appropriate for kids ages like 18 months to almost age of 6 to be fearful of trying new foods, right? And a lot of parents, including myself, being a first-time mom, I was panicking. My son loves blackberries, and literally a week later, he's like, "Ew, I don't want it." I'm like, "What? What happened?" I just spent like $50 on blackberries. Not literally, but
Yeah, yeah.
why do you not like it? And that's the thing. They just as they get older, they start developing fears and anxiety around things, which is them building their personality, right? So I took something as it's not as complex, but a pretty big topic like neophobia, broke it down to 4.5 minutes of this is what it is. It's developmentally normal. It's actually an evolutionary thing that happens. It's coming down from the hunter and gatherer stage where, when hunter and gatherers saw new food, they were very skeptical. They're like, whoa, I don't know if this is gonna kill me or not. Like
Yeah.
it's a protective mechanism for humans. So it's very normal and parents need to relax. And that doesn't mean that you don't try new foods. It's you try it in a fun and positive manner. That does not mean that you give in to every single craving that your child has for sugar, right? You tried it in a fun manner and I gave like 3 or 4 tips, I believe, and then we ended it there. And I plan on doing one every other week for right now because I have a lot going on with the incubator. And the goal is eventually, as I'm able to hire people, that I'll have other experts on, like a pediatrician, a nutritionist, a feeding therapist, stuff like that, like why kids should be eating textures. We have to get away from the purees. once they're old enough to like chew with their gums, right? So there's a lot of that education coming on because I think there's a heavy lack of education when it comes to nutrition in this country alone, just from what I hear from parents. So there's that. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is it's more like blogs, but they're educational blogs. So there'll be a side of blog of South Asian, like the historical context behind South Asian food, how it was developed, how the colonization of India from, England, what that did to our food, right? There's a historical aspect to it. I think it's necessary. If people want to read it, they're more than welcome to on the website. It's not up yet. My husband's actually, that's his job this weekend to get it up. I've been writing away. And then the second part is education. It's early education. And it's not just education regarding like AJ the Spoon, the book that I wrote. It's education like read to your child why why limited screen time is so important, right? And it's never in the tone of you're a bad parent if you're not doing this. It's like, hey, here's the information. I want parents to come to Tales of Spoon and Spices brand and be like, you know what, I left with something. I'm more empowered now because of this, and I can go make a better decision for my child. That's what I want them to leave with, not like, oh man, I'm not doing it. I'm a shitty parent, because I feel like a shitty parent on a daily basis, especially when I have to work too much, right? So I just want parents to have the knowledge at the tip of their fingers and feel empowered and make great decisions every day and do it in a fun and non-politicized, that's the right word, manner, because everything is becoming politicized. And I don't want to get into that part of the conversation by any means, but I just have noticed that like you can't say certain things and you can't be a certain way. It's like, okay, can we just go back to the simple days where it's like, that sounds terrible. I'm about to get, shit for saying it like that. But what I'm saying is where it's like, just state the facts. Just state the facts. It's backed by science, by a lot of research, and then move on. Either you take it or you don't. And that's sort of how I'm going to make this company. And that's who I am at the core. I don't judge people if they take it or not take my advice, but that is what Tales of Spoon and Spice is about, is being very authentic to yourself.
Yeah, fair enough. Like the
Station, yeah.
politicization, yeah, English. That was what I was getting with at with the diversity word
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, yeah, 100%. Um, so if somebody wants to buy the book or buy your food or get in contact or they want to be
Yeah.
involved in the project, where should they go?
They can reach out directly to me. They can just go on talesofspoonandspice.com. It's TALES and then of spoon and spice.com. And there's a contact page there. You can just contact and say, hey, I want to work with you, or whatever feedback you want to give. Or you can go on our Instagram and there's a contact there, or you can DM me personally. You can find me on Instagram if you want. You can email me. I can give you my email. There's so many ways to get in contact with me. Yeah, those are like just a few.
Yeah, sounds great. And all those links, the link to the Instagram and the website will definitely be in the description. So if you're
Sure.
listening and you're interested, go click on those. And then the book, you said it's going to be out for pre-order June 1st. So pulling up the calendar. So
So
you
I'm
that will
launching it.
be
Yeah. I'm launching
so
it June 1st. Yeah.
okay, so it will have been launched for pre-order when this goes out. So where should the people, is it Amazon or where should the people go for that?
So it's I'm self-published here. So you basically will again go to the website. So it will be an Age of the Spoon. Again, my husband is on it, I promise. There'll be an Age of the Spoon little tab on the website. There'll be links in the bio for Instagram, and you can just click it. There'll be very clear instructions. Again, the teaching side of me, it'll be there. You can click it. You can DM me on Instagram and say, hey, I really want to buy the book. Um, but yeah, I think from with everything that's going on, again from a legal perspective, and this is my first time doing it, if everything goes well, June 1st is when I will physically announce that, hey, there's a book called Age of the Spoon. I mean, I guess I announced it here on your podcast first. Lucky you.
Yeah.
But officially where you can hit pre-order and like spend the money if you want to spend the money, will not be until July. But you can go ahead and put yourself on the wait list. You can do whatever you have to do. I think I'm gonna create a wait list because I actually have a lot of people interested. I'm also planning on donating a lot of books to a lot of schools who lack the funding for new books, for books on like diverse food and culture. So I plan on doing that as well. So if there's any schools out here in Chicagoland area, or even other parts, I guess it doesn't have to be Chicagoland area, would want a book like this, that's another thing that they can like email me about and we can set something up.
Yeah, 100%. Sounds like you've got a long battle ahead of you for sure.
Oh,
But definitely wishing all the best. I love what you're doing. I think it's
thank you.
super important work that, well, somebody's got to do it. But it's super
Yes.
important work, right? It's a big theme of that I hear a lot. Like my parents, even my parents are like, "Oh, what should I eat with it?" I was like, "Okay, guys, you just." But it's super important work because there's so much information out there, and it's really hard to sift through all of it. So, the education piece to what you're doing, I think, is super important as well, and people should definitely go check that stuff out. Any last nickels from you before we get you out of here?
No, no. Thank you for having me, Eric. This was wonderful. I'm so glad I got to, do my first podcast with you. So this is exciting, a fun experience.
Awesome. Guys, if you're interested, obviously click the links in the descriptions and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Bye.